She ran at 6:49 in the morning with a split cheek, one broken shoe strap, and exactly nowhere to go. She did not know that the man standing at the end of that street had been waiting, unknowingly, for 9 years. Brennan caught her wrist at the top of the staircase. Not with his fist. Never with his fist in the beginning. Just his fingers, wrapped around the bone of her wrist the way a door closes. Quiet, final, leaving no doubt about what it intended. "You do not walk away from me," he said pleasantly. Adiz pulled free. She did not think. Her feet were already moving before her mind had finished forming the decision. Down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the wet October morning with its cold grey air and pavement still dark from overnight rain, and the distant sound of Seoul waking up 2 blocks in every direction. She ran. Her shoes hit the pavement hard. Her chest burned. The side of her face throbbed with every heartbeat, a deep and specific pain that had its own rhythm now, the rhythm of something struck and refusing to let her forget it. She did not look back. She heard his voice behind her, calling her name, and that was exactly the sound that made her run faster. The black car was parked at the corner outside her employer's building. She did not see it until the rear door opened and a man stepped directly into her path with the measured unhurriedness of someone who had already calculated every option and decided to stand still. She stopped 3 feet from him. He was tall. Dark suit, perfectly pressed in the way that suggested the suit was not something he thought about. His eyes went straight to her face and landed on the swollen cheek, with the precise and immediate focus of a man who had seen damage before and recognized it for exactly what it was. "Who marked your face?" He asked it quietly. Not softly, quietly, which was different. The way a surgeon asks before he cuts. The way a man asks when he already knows the answer will require more than words. Adiz opened her mouth. Her throat had closed. Her lungs were still trying to catch up with the last 2 minutes of her life. She was standing in front of Seon on a public pavement at 6:49 in the morning, looking exactly like what she was, a woman who had been struck and had run here because here was the only direction available. Seon waited. He did not fill the silence. He did not look around to see who might be watching. He did not reach toward her or lean back or do any of the careful choreography of a man who wanted to appear helpful while maintaining a precise distance from the actual situation. He stood with his eyes on her face and gave her the complete weight of his attention and nothing else. She did not get to answer. Adiz. Brennan's voice. Behind her. Close enough that the air shifted. Her whole body responded before she heard the footstep, every muscle from the soles of her feet upward, tightening in the involuntary and deeply memorized preparation of a person who had learned to brace before impact arrived. Brennan stopped 4 feet back. He looked at Seon with the comfortable assessment of a man who had never encountered a wall he could not eventually charm his way around. He clocked the suit, the car, the driver who had not moved from behind the wheel. He ran his calculation. He decided this was manageable. "She is my girlfriend," Brennan said, keeping his voice warm. "We had a disagreement this morning. Private matter." His eyes cut briefly to Adiz, a look with its own complete language, every word of which she already knew by heart, then back to Seon. "If you could give us a moment, I would really appreciate it." Seon turned toward Brennan. He did it slowly. The way a man turns when he has made a deliberate decision to give something his full and undivided attention. He looked at Brennan's face. Then his hands. Then his face again. "No," Seon said. Brennan's jaw moved forward slightly. "Excuse me." "She works for me," Seon said. "She is already late." Her face was not like that yesterday. Brennan laughed, the short, disbelieving laugh of a man who has decided the person in front of him does not understand the situation. "I don't know who you are, but this is a private." "I know who you are," Seon said. The laugh stopped. Seon took 1 step toward Brennan. Just one. His hands went into his trouser pockets. His expression did not shift by a single degree. He looked at Brennan with the specific and total calm of a man who had never once in his professional life needed volume to make something land exactly where he intended it. "If you touch her again," Seon said, "you lose the hands." The delivery rider at the corner had gone completely still. The woman with the paper cup outside the cafe had stopped walking. 3 full seconds of absolute quiet on a Seoul street, which in October at 6:49 in the morning was not nothing. Brennan stood very still. His pride was loud. It had always been his loudest feature. But underneath the pride, something older and more honest sent a clear signal upward that his pride could not fully override. The signal said, "This man means exactly what he just said. Not performance. Not a bluff designed to dissolve the moment the stranger walked away. A precise and literal description of what would actually happen." Brennan looked at Adiz one final time. She was looking at the building entrance beyond Seowen's shoulder. He straightened his jacket with both hands, took one step back, then another, turned and walked away without looking back, and the sound of his footsteps thinned steadily into the noise of the morning until she could not separate them from everything else. Adiz stood on the pavement and breathed. Seowen turned back to her. He looked at her cheek once, briefly, then at her eyes. "Can you walk?" "Yes," she said, steadier than she had any right to be. "Get in the car. I will take you up." The interior of the car was the quietest place Adiz had been in months. Dark leather, tinted windows, the noise of soul outside reduced to something distant and irrelevant the moment the door closed. Seowen sat on his side with a full and deliberate distance between them and looked out his window at the city moving past. She sat with her bag on her lap, her hands folded over it, the side of her face still radiating heat. "Left panel," he said without turning from his window. "There is a first aid kit." She found it. Small, navy blue, precisely where he said it would be. She snapped the ice pack inside and pressed it to her cheek and exhaled slowly through her nose. From the corner of her eye, she saw him glance at her. Just once. Then back to his window. The building arrived. He held the door without ceremony, the practical act of a man whose hand was already on the door. She stepped out with the ice pack against her cheek and her bag back on her shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for what happened back there." He looked at her with the directness she was already beginning to understand was simply how he looked at things. "Does he know where you live?" "Yes," she said. He nodded once and moved toward the entrance. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor. A child stood in the hallway. Small and sleep-soft, wearing yellow pajamas printed all over with tiny rabbits. Her hair was sticking up on one side. Both arms extended before the elevator had fully opened, her whole small body leaning forward with the impatience of someone who had been waiting since the exact moment she woke up. "Adiz, you are late." Adiz stepped out and crouched down, and the impact of the small body hit her with the full committed force of someone who was done waiting. She pressed her face into the child's hair and held on. In her smelled like sleep and lavender and something specific and irreplaceable underneath both of those things, something that had no name except hers. "I know, baby. I am sorry." In her leaned back and looked at Adiz's face with the direct and completely unself-conscious attention that children had not yet been trained to soften. Her dark eyes moved to the swollen cheek. Her brow drew together in a way that was far too old for her face. "You have an OE," she said. "I bumped it. It is fine." In her held the look one more second, measuring, unconvinced. Then she turned to her father standing just behind. Appa. Grave seriousness. The tone of someone filing an official report. Adiz has an OE on her face. "I see it," Seowen said, looking at his daughter. And something opened in his face that no other context in his life appeared to produce. Something completely unguarded. Soft in a way his face was not soft in any other room in the world. "Go get dressed." Mrs. Boone made breakfast. In her grabbed Adiz's hand. "Come with me." "Let her put her bag down first," Seowen said. In her released the hand with a sigh of profound theatrical suffering and disappeared down the hallway. That morning, over coffee she had not asked for but which appeared on the counter near her side of the kitchen without a word, Seowen told her that a man named Wook would collect her every morning at 7:15, starting tomorrow. "That is really not." 7:15, he said. Same tone. No further explanation. She read his face. The conversation had already concluded on his side. "Okay," she said. He picked up his cup and moved toward his study. At the doorway he stopped without turning. "The ice pack," he said. 20 minutes tonight. The door closed. Adiz stood in the kitchen with both hands wrapped around her coffee and looked at the closed door and felt something settle in her chest that she was not, under any circumstances, going to examine right now. He asked 7 words on a pavement and Brennan walked away with his pride in pieces and his hands still attached, barely. But what Seoan does not yet know is that the woman standing in his kitchen has been watching him for months, waiting to know if she can trust him with a secret that will unravel everything his family thought it buried. There is a particular kind of danger in being close to someone you cannot stop watching. Seoan had been watching the necklace for 6 weeks before he admitted, very carefully, very privately, that it was not the necklace he was watching. Wook arrived at exactly 7:15 every morning. Broad, quiet, mid-40s, with the careful eyes of a man who had spent his entire professional life watching the world without being watched back. He said nothing on the drives. Adiz appreciated the complete absence of conversation. On the 9th evening, Brennan was outside her building when Wook pulled up. He stood against the wall beside the entrance with his arms crossed and his face arranged into the reasonable expression, the patient one, the understanding one, the one who only wanted to talk. The expression Adiz had learned years ago preceded the other one. The way a low sky preceded rain. Wook parked the car at a deliberate angle. He stepped out first. He placed his body between Adiz and the building entrance with the smooth economy of someone who had done this kind of thing before and found it entirely unremarkable. "Not tonight," Adiz said. "Not tonight," Wook said. Brennan's eyes moved over Wook with the measuring look of a man running a cost-benefit calculation on a physical barrier. Whatever he read in Wook's particular stillness resolved the calculation quickly. He pushed off the wall and turned the corner and was gone. Adiz let out the breath that had been sitting in her chest since the car stopped. "Go inside," Wook said. "Lock the top bolt." She went inside. She locked both bolts. She sat on the edge of her bed in the quiet and looked at the wall. She lifted the necklace from her throat and laid it on the nightstand the way she did every single night, carefully, so the pendant rested flat and the gold caught the light from the window and held it. She had worn that necklace every day for 9 years. Through 3 surgeries and 14 months of recovery in a Cape Town private clinic. Through the construction of an entirely new identity assembled document by document, reference by reference, with the help of 2 people who had asked her nothing beyond what they needed to know to help her disappear properly. The necklace was the one thing she had woken up holding in that hospital, her hand wrapped around the chain while bandages covered everything else. In those first terrible and confused days, it was the one thing that told her she was still, underneath all the damage, exactly the same person she had been before. She lay back and stared at the ceiling for a long time before sleep came. 3 weeks into the routine, on a quiet Wednesday morning, Seoan did not take his coffee to his study. He stood at the kitchen window and said, without turning around, "Inha was asking me something last night." Adiz's knife continued moving on the cutting board. "About your necklace," he said. "She wanted to know why you wear it every day." The knife slowed by half a second. She kept her eyes on the fruit. "What did you tell her?" "I told her some things matter enough to keep close," he said. He turned then. He leaned back against the counter with his coffee cup in both hands and looked at her across the kitchen, openly, directly, without pretending he was looking at something else. "What is it?" he asked. "The pendant." "A crescent," she said. "I bought it at a market. Cape Town. Years ago." "Which market?" She looked up at him. His face was completely still. "One of the outdoor ones," she said. "Near the waterfront. I don't remember exactly which." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, picked up his coffee, and walked to his study. The door closed. Adiz stood at the cutting board with the knife in her hand and did not move for 3 full seconds. In his study, Seoan sat at his desk and did not open a single document. He sat very still and looked at the wall. He had commissioned a necklace once. 11 years ago. A jeweler in Insadong who worked only on private commissions. The crescent shape had been his own sketch, the specific curve of it, the angle, the way the chain connected at the upper point rather than the lower, which was unusual and had been entirely his own specific request. The engraving on the back had been 2 letters intertwined, cut into the gold under magnifying glass while he watched. He picked up his phone. "Find the jeweler on Insadong. Private commissions." The one I used 11 years ago. Find him today. Brennan came back. He always came back. He was smarter this time. He did not come to the building. He found her at a small convenience store 2 streets away, appearing at her shoulder in the narrow refrigerator aisle the way a man appears who has been watching her routine long enough to know exactly where she stopped on her lunch break. "You have me blocked," he said pleasantly, eyes on the refrigerator. "Every number." "Yes," she said. His hand closed around her wrist. Not violently. That was never how it started. Just firm. Just the grip of a man communicating that she was not going anywhere until he decided she was. Then the door opened. Wook walked in. Brennan released her wrist before Wook was close enough to see the grip. He stepped back. He smiled. "Think very carefully about what you are doing," he said quietly, and walked out. Adiz stood at the counter with her wrist pressed against her stomach. Wook stopped beside her. He looked at her wrist. He looked at the door. "He touched you." "My wrist." "He grabbed my wrist." Wook took out his phone. That evening, after Inher was asleep and Adiz had gone home, Seon got into his car. He had known for 5 weeks that Brennan worked at a mid-sized shipping firm in Yongsan. He had known for 4 weeks that the firm's parent company was a subsidiary of a holding group. He had known for 3 weeks that he owned 31% of that holding group and held 2 board seats. He had not used this information until tonight. He arrived at 8:15. Brennan was still at his desk on the 5th floor when a receptionist who had been called ahead by Seo Owen's office showed him to the small conference room near the elevator bank. Brennan walked in expecting a client meeting. He walked in and saw Seo Owen sitting at the head of the conference table with a single folder in front of him, hands folded on top of it, and the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he was always going to arrive and is simply waiting for the other person to catch up to this fact. Brennan sat down slowly at the opposite end of the table. "You are the man from the pavement," he said. "I am Seo Owen." He turned the folder so Brennan could read the top document. "I own 31% of Daesong Holdings. Daesong Holdings owns Meridian Logistics. Meridian Logistics is the parent company of the firm you have been employed by for the past 2 years." The color left Brennan's face in stages. Each stage worse than the last. "Every salary deposit you have received for 2 years came from a payroll system that exists within my ownership structure," Seoan said, in the same even tone he had used for every sentence. "Your contract contains a standard conduct clause in Section 14. My legal team reviewed it this afternoon. You are in breach." Brennan said nothing. His jaw was very tight. "Your access card deactivates at midnight tonight," Seoan said. "A termination letter will be processed by HR tomorrow morning. You will not be eligible for a reference. You will also find that your work authorization renewal, which is due in 5 weeks, has encountered a complication at the processing stage." Brennan's mouth opened. "She told you to leave her alone," Seoan said. "You put your hand on her wrist today anyway." He held the look for 2 seconds. "If you contact her again through any channel, in any form, the legal file my team has prepared goes to the prosecutor's office. Medical records, photographs, a testimony from a previous partner who filed a protection order in Cape Town 3 years ago." He stood. He picked up the folder. "She deserves everything you never gave her," he said. "And you deserve exactly what is coming." He walked to the door and left without looking back. The jealousy happened on a Thursday evening at a restaurant with no prices on the menu. Adiz sat within her at a table near the window while Seoan handled a business dinner 12 feet away, controlled, precise, commanding the room without appearing to try. A woman approached his table at the midpoint of the evening. Impeccably dressed. Beautiful in the polished and deliberate way of a woman who had calculated exactly this kind of arrival. She laughed at something Seoan said and placed her hand briefly on his arm. Adiz cut Inha's food into smaller pieces with very precise and careful cuts. "Are you okay?" Inha asked. "Completely fine," Adiz said. "Eat your dinner." When Seoan came to their table later and the woman passed by to say goodbye, mentioning an event next month, perhaps they would see each other there, he looked at her with the composed and polite distance he used for every professional interaction. He said his schedule was quite committed these days. He turned his attention back to the table. When he sat back, his eyes went to Adiz briefly. The corner of his mouth moved by the smallest and most controlled degree. She looked at her plate. The tightness in her chest had changed its quality entirely. It no longer felt like something wrong. It felt like something she could no longer pretend was not there. The files from Director Chai arrived on a Monday morning. Seo Owen read them alone at his desk before anyone arrived in the apartment. The original accident report from the coastal road outside Busan. 3 pages compared to the 1-page official version. The 2 missing pages contained a witness statement from a driver who had seen a second vehicle deliberately accelerate into the first car on a stretch of road with no cameras and no other witnesses. The statement had been collected and then removed from the official record. The Cape Town hospital file. A patient admitted 9 days after the Busan accident date. Unconscious on admission. No identification. Transport paid for by a third party whose payment method, when traced by Director Chai's investigator, connected through 2 shell accounts to a financial channel he recognized with complete certainty. A channel his mother had used for private arrangements for 20 years. He turned the page. The obstetric notes were attached separately. A single folded sheet clipped to the back of the surgical file. Naledi had been 14 weeks pregnant at the time of the accident. He set the page down. He picked it up again. A girl. 3.1 kilograms. Full term. Healthy. The line below the delivery notes read, infant transferred to private transport arranged by third party on day 4 postpartum. Patient was under sedation for post-surgical procedure at time of transfer. Patient was not consulted. He read that line 3 times. His mother, or someone acting directly for his mother, had been in Cape Town. Had waited for the delivery. And when Naledi was sedated and could not object and could not know what was happening in the room next door, someone had walked into that clinic and taken his daughter and put her on a plane to Seoul. He had been sitting in this same apartment 4 weeks later when Wook knocked on his study door and told him there was a woman downstairs. A representative, she said, from a private intermediary. She had something that belonged to him. He had gone downstairs. There was a baby in a carrier on the lobby table. His mother had called that evening and said, in the composed and measured tone she used for everything, that she had arranged for the child to be brought home. That Naledi was gone. That the child was his and Seoul was where she belonged. He had believed her. He had picked up his daughter and believed every word because he was grieving and the baby was real and warm and present and the grief needed somewhere to go. He closed the file. He placed both hands flat on the desk and looked at the wall and breathed very carefully for a long time. Naledi had woken up from surgery in that Cape Town clinic and her daughter was already gone. He owns the truth now. Every page of it. The accident was no accident. The necklace is the only one that was ever made. And the woman cutting fruit in his kitchen every morning, the woman his daughter reached for on the very first day, she has been here for 8 months, waiting to see if she could trust him. This is where everything breaks open. You are not ready. Stay with us. She had rehearsed this conversation across 8 months of mornings in a kitchen that should have always been hers. Not one single rehearsal had felt like this, standing in front of him in the actual light with the actual rain coming down and her real name sitting in her throat like something that had been waiting 9 years to be spoken aloud. He came out of his study the following morning at 11 and stood in the kitchen doorway. In her, he said. Go and watch your program for 20 minutes. Inher looked between the 2 adults with the brief and accurate assessment of a child reading the temperature of a room. Then she slid off her stool and disappeared without argument. Seo Owen came into the kitchen. Adiz was at the counter. She picked up the knife and began cutting the apple into the careful segments Inher preferred. Put it down, he said. She set the knife on the cutting board. She turned and faced him. He was standing close, closer than the usual kitchen distance. Not crowding. Not performing concern. Just present. His arms at his sides. His eyes carrying the quality she had been watching develop for months. Not the professional distance he used for the rest of the world, but the deep and particular attention that saw past the surface of things. Tell me about the accident, he said. The kitchen was completely quiet. The coastal road outside Busan, he said. 9 years ago. October. From the living room, Inha's program played at its normal cheerful volume. Outside, somewhere below, a delivery truck beeped twice as it reversed. The Han River was visible through the kitchen window, moving the way it always moved, indifferent to everything happening in the apartment above it. Junho Shisaid. His real name. The name before Seoon. The name she had not spoken aloud in 9 years. It landed in him at a level below thought. She watched it happen, the fractional shift in his face, the way his jaw moved slightly, the recognition in his eyes of something that could not be explained and could no longer be denied. "How long?" he said. "How long have you been in this apartment knowing who I am?" 8 months, she said. "You came back to Seoul before that?" "Yes." "For in her?" "Yes." Her hand pressed flat against the counter. "I found the agency. I arranged the interview. I watched your building from across the street for 3 years before I walked through that door." He held her gaze. "My mother," he said. She looked at him for a long time. "Yes." He turned away from her. He faced the window with both hands flat on the counter. His shoulder blades were tight under his jacket, the only place on his body where the tension ever showed, because everywhere else he had perfect control of it. She told him everything. The car that came from behind on the coastal road, not losing control, not drifting, but accelerating deliberately into the driver's side on a wet road with no barriers on the ocean edge. The impact. The barrier giving way. The fall into cold dark water flooding through the broken window. The darkness after that, which lasted a very long time. She told him about waking up in Cape Town with her face wrapped in bandages, her hand wrapped around the necklace. A nurse she had never seen sitting beside the bed, telling her she had been sedated for 6 days. That she was in South Africa. That her transport and care had been arranged and paid for by a private party whose name the nurse did not have. She told him about the 3 surgeries. The surgeon who told her honestly, after the second, that when the reconstruction was complete, no one who had known her face before would recognize it. She had lain in the recovery room and stared at the ceiling and understood exactly what that meant. Whoever arranged the accident had arranged it to be final. The new face was her only advantage, the one thing they had not anticipated. She told him about building Adiz Meris from nothing. Documentation, work history, references constructed piece by piece with the help of 2 people who asked no questions and expected nothing except that she stay safe and stay disappeared. She told him about coming back to Seoul. 3 years of watching from a distance first, learning the shape of Inha's life, the park she visited on Saturdays, finding the agency, walking into the interview, seeing her daughter for the first time since she was 3 months old and not being allowed to show a single thing on her face that was not professional warmth and competence. She told him she had not known, walking into this apartment for the first time, whether the grief that Wook had once mentioned quietly in passing was real or performed. She had not known whether Seo Awen had been part of what his mother had done. She had needed to watch him. 8 months of watching him with his daughter, with his people, in the quiet of those evening conversations, before she was certain enough. When she finished, she was still at the counter with her hand flat on the surface and her eyes on his back. He turned around. He looked at her across the kitchen with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not the controlled public face. Not the soft private face he wore for Inha. Something completely stripped of management, something that had been under everything else for 9 years and had just come to the surface because there was no longer any reason to hold it down. "She stood in front of me," he said. His voice was completely level, and that levelness was more precise and more final than anything loud could have been. "She told me you were dead and she watched me grieve you." "I know," Adiz said. "I grieved you for years." "I know." He looked at her face. Really looked, the way he had been careful not to look across 8 months of close proximity. As though full attention was something he had been rationing because he did not trust what it would show him. "Go and be within her," he said. "I need to be alone with this first." She went. He drove to Hanamdong alone that afternoon. He did not call ahead. He found his mother in the formal receiving room, the high-back chairs, the correct lighting she had always used for conversations she intended to control. She was sitting with tea, composed, unsurprised. The expression of a woman who had been expecting this visit and had prepared for it accordingly. He placed the folder from Director Chai on the table between them. "Read it," he said. She read the accident report first, then the hospital file, then the obstetric notes, then the delivery transfer record, with its single line at the bottom. Patient was not consulted. She closed the folder. She placed her hands in her lap. Everything I did, she said, I did for this family. He looked at her across the table for a long and quiet moment. You tried to kill her, he said. You paid someone to run her off a coastal road on a wet night with no barriers on the ocean side. You arranged for her to be transported unconscious to another country and surgically rebuilt so that if she survived, which you did not plan for, she could not return to the life she had. You waited until she was sedated from surgery and you sent someone to take the baby. You brought the baby to Seoul. You handed her to me and you stood in front of me and told me her mother was dead. He held her gaze. And then you watched me raise that child for 4 years knowing that her mother was alive and had woken up in that clinic and found her gone. Madame Seo said nothing. She spent 3 years watching from a distance, he said. She could not come back as herself because you made sure there was no self to come back as. She arranged a job interview. She walked into my apartment and saw her daughter for the first time in 4 years and could not show a single thing on her face. He stopped. Inha reached for her hand on the first day. Did you know that? Your granddaughter found her mother by instinct in a room full of strangers because some part of a 4-year-old child knew what your arrangements could not erase. She was not suitable, Madame Seo said. Everything I did was calculated to protect what this family. I am going to stop you there, he said. His voice had not changed, had not risen, had not sharpened. The same even tone he had used for every sentence in this room, and that precision was more final than anything loud could have been. A criminal submission was filed this morning before I drove here, he said. An independent firm that does not work for me and cannot be influenced by anything you have access to filed attempted murder and criminal conspiracy charges with the prosecutor's office at 9:15. The documentation is complete, the payment trail connecting your financial channel to the clinic transport, the witness statement removed from the coastal road accident report, the delivery transfer record. He opened the second folder. As of this morning, you have also been removed from every position you hold in the family's business operations. Every account, every board seat, every operational element. The legal transfer has been witnessed and filed. For the first time, her composure showed something at the edges. Not fear. Not remorse. The specific expression of a woman who has just understood the full dimensions of what is being taken from her. You will not leave the Hannam property without notification, he said. You will not contact Naledi. You will not contact Inha. You will not contact anyone in my household. If you violate any condition, the prosecutor's office will be notified immediately and your legal team will no longer have the option of a negotiated outcome. You are taking everything, she said. She woke up in a clinic in Cape Town with no face and no name and no baby and no way home, he said. You took everything from her first. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He picked up both folders. I will not be coming here again, he said. Inha will not be coming here. When she is old enough to decide whether she wants a relationship with you, she will make that decision herself with the full truth of what you did. I will make certain of that. He looked at his mother one final time across that room. I spent 9 years grieving a woman who was alive, he said. There is no version of what you did that this family recovers from. There is only what comes after it. He left. The rain came 3 days later. Heavy, committed, turning the streets below into shallow rivers. Adiz had stayed late because Inha had woken from her afternoon nap with a fever, and by the time the child's temperature came down and her breathing deepened into genuine sleep, it was past 8 and the rain had not eased. Seoan appeared in the doorway of Inha's room. He looked at his daughter, then at Adiz, then at the window. Wook cannot get through, he said quietly. The underpass near your building is flooded. She looked at the rain, a solid moving wall against the glass. Stay, he said. The word landed differently than it would have landed 4 months ago. She nodded. In the kitchen, she put the kettle on because she needed something to do with her hands. He came in 10 minutes later and sat at the counter. She made 2 cups of tea and placed one in front of him and sat on the other side of the counter, and they held their cups while the rain drove against the windows and the apartment held them both in its warm and total quiet. He looked at her across the counter. Madame Seo has lost everything she actually cared about, he said. Her position, her authority, her access to everything she spent 40 years building. She is under house restriction. If she violates any condition, the criminal submission goes in. Is that enough? Adiz asked. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said honestly. It is not enough. But it is what the law will sustain. A prison sentence she could contest and reduce. This, he looked at his hands, this she cannot get back from. Ever. The rain pressed harder against the glass. The city outside had disappeared behind water. He stood. He came around the counter. She did not move back. He stopped in front of her, close, the closest he had stood to her in 8 months of shared space. His hand came up slowly. He touched the pendant at her throat, 2 fingers, gentle, lifting it slightly from her collarbone and turning it over. He read the engraving on the back. His thumb moved across the 2 letters once. He looked up at her face. I made this, he said. 11 years ago. I took a sketch to a jeweler in Insadong and I watched him cut these letters into the gold with a tool smaller than a pen. He held her gaze. I gave it to a woman I was going to marry. The jeweler confirmed 2 weeks ago that only one was ever made. It could only have come from one place. He did not release the pendant. Tell me the truth. Not the market in Cape Town. The truth. She looked at him for a long moment. Naledi, she said. Her real name. The one she had not spoken aloud in 9 years. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, she was still right there in front of him, the pendant between them, the rain still coming down, in her asleep down the hallway, 9 years sitting in the kitchen with both of them. I have been falling in love with you, he said, for months. While I believed I was somehow betraying someone I had lost. His voice was low and completely even. And then I understood they were the same person. That it was always you. She looked at his face, the line of his jaw, the particular quality of his eyes when he was not managing what they showed. The man she had watched for 8 months from a careful distance and had been falling toward for longer than 8 months. Longer than 9 years. Falling toward him since before the accident and during it and after it and across every surgery and every document she had assembled to become someone else. Junho Shisaidi. He leaned forward. His forehead came to rest against hers. The pendant between them. The rain against the windows. Everything else suspended. Can I? He said. Yes, she said. Before he needed to finish. He kissed her slowly, the way a person moves toward something they have been afraid to want and have finally stopped being afraid of. His hands came up to her face, careful, so careful, cupping her jaw as though she was something that had survived a great deal and deserved to be held with the full knowledge of that. She put both hands against his chest and felt his heartbeat under her palms. Steady. Almost steady. She leaned into him. He held her. The rain drove against the 14th floor and the city below was all water and the kitchen was warm and the kiss lasted as long as it needed to last, which was long. When he pulled back, he looked at her face in the kitchen light. Something in his eyes had changed its quality entirely. Rest, he said. She stood at the guest room door and looked at him standing in the hallway. Good night, Junho. Good night, Naledi, he said. Her name. Her real name, in his voice, the way he had always said it, the specific sound of it that no one else had ever produced. It sat in the center of her chest and radiated warmth outward in every direction. She closed the door. He proposed on a Tuesday evening. In her was a sleep. Naledi was at the low table near the window with a book, the lamp making a warm circle of light over her, the necklace at her throat where it always was. He came out of his study and sat across from her and placed a small box on the table between them. I had a ring made once before, he said. I lost it when I lost you. I had another one made 8 weeks ago. He looked at her directly. I am not the same person who chose you then. You are not the same person I chose. But I am choosing you now with the full knowledge of everything that choosing you has cost and the complete absence of any interest in choosing differently. She opened the box. The ring was simple and exact and had the same engraving on the inner band as the pendant at her throat. 2 letters intertwined. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked up at him. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes." He took the ring from the box and put it on her hand. From down the hallway, small, sleepy, entirely on time, Appa, water. Seoon looked at Naledi. She pressed her lips together. He stood and walked down the hallway to his daughter's room. Naledi sat at the low table with the ring on her finger and listened to the sound of him getting his daughter water and the quiet sound of their voices and then the quiet again. She held the pendant. She looked at the ring. She had carried this necklace through everything. Now she understood what it had been carrying her toward. They were married on a Saturday in early spring. 30 people in a private garden outside the city. People who knew the real story. Not the household version, not the public version, but the complete version, with all of its damage and its distance and the stubborn and improbable insistence of 2 people on finding their way back to the same place. In her wore a white dress with a yellow ribbon and distributed flower petals along the garden path with extreme and serious precision, pausing twice to redistribute where she felt the coverage was inadequate. Naledi came down the path in the spring light with the necklace at her throat. Seoon watched her walk toward him. He stood at the end of the path with his hands at his sides and his face completely and entirely unmanaged. No professional distance, no controlled expression, none of the careful architecture that ran his face in every other context. Just the face of a man watching a woman walk toward him who had survived everything the world had placed between them and had come back anyway. She reached him. Junho Shisaide. Quiet. Just for him. Naledi, he said. Just for her. Her name, given back to her, with everything it had ever contained. They said their words to each other. They meant every single one. 18 months later, Inha sat cross-legged on the living room floor and studied the face of her new sibling with the careful attention of a senior researcher encountering new data. The baby was 12 days old. He had a full head of dark hair and the permanent expression of someone who found his current circumstances mildly beneath his expectations. He does not do very much, Inha said. He will, Naledi said from the sofa. Feet tucked under her, tea on the armrest, watching her daughter examine her son with the expression of a woman who is completely and exactly where she is supposed to be in the world. Seoon sat in the armchair watching both his children and his wife. The expression on his face was the one that only this room ever produced in him. No management, no architecture, nothing held back. Every year of what had been survived was visible in it. Every day of what they had built since. The complete and settled knowledge of a man who knows exactly what he has and what it cost, and does not look away from either of those truths. Naledi looked at him from the sofa. He looked back at her. The necklace was on the nightstand in the next room. 9 years. 3 surgeries. 2 names. 1 child who had reached for both their hands at the same moment at a fountain in a park on a mild autumn morning and pulled them both forward. It had always been pointing here. Every single inch of it had always been pointing exactly here. He asked 7 words on a pavement and it dismantled everything she had built to stay hidden. She said 1 real name in a rain-soaked kitchen and it dismantled everything he had built to stay numb. Tell me in the comments. Which moment destroyed you? The question on the pavement? The conference room with Brennan? The pendant turned over in the kitchen in the rain? The proposal on a Tuesday evening with Inha calling for water from down the hall? If this story found you, like it, share it with someone who deserves a story that earns every moment it delivers, and subscribe because what comes next will not wait for you. I will see you there.